During her nephew's graduation ceremony, Caroline noticed the program was listed as the aunt who never accomplished anything. She clutched the program with trembling hands, feeling the weight of those cruel words piercing her chest like sharp knives. This is the story of Caroline Mitchell, a 52-year-old woman who dedicated her life to others, only to discover that her family saw her as a liability. What she did next shocked everyone and changed the course of her life forever.
The university auditorium was packed with proud families. Colorful balloons floated attached to chairs. Cameras flashed everywhere, and an excited buzz filled the air. Caroline arrived 40 minutes early, wanting to secure a good seat to see Daniel receive his diploma. At the entrance, volunteers distributed ceremony programs, thick brochures with navy blue hardcovers and the university's gold crest emblazoned on them. Caroline picked up a copy and smiled at the volunteer, a young student with a wide grin. She found a seat in the 5th row near the central aisle, perfect for taking photos when Daniel went up on stage. As she settled in, Caroline opened the program to locate her nephew's name on the list of graduates. Her eyes scanned the pages, past the president's messages, the list of academic honors, until she reached the family acknowledgments section. That's when she saw it. Just below the photo of Daniel smiling in his cap and gown, there was a section where each graduate could include personal acknowledgments. Daniel's text read, "I thank my parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, for all their financial and emotional support. To my younger brother, Kyle, for always inspiring me. To my paternal grandparents, George and Martha, for their wisdom. And to my Aunt Caroline, the aunt who never achieved anything but who was always there." Caroline read the sentence 3 times, each reading more painful than the last. Her hands began to sweat, slightly staining the program pages. She looked around, paranoid that someone might have seen her reaction, but everyone was busy with their own conversations and preparations. The aunt who never accomplished anything. The words echoed in her mind like a cruel mantra. She slammed the program shut and tucked it under her bag, as if hiding it might make the words disappear. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it pulsing in her ears. Then Caroline saw her sister Linda enter the auditorium, accompanied by Robert, her brother-in-law, and Kyle, her 15-year-old youngest son. Linda waved excitedly when she saw her, and Caroline forced a smile in response, raising her hand in a mechanical gesture. But something had changed. For the first time in decades, Caroline looked at her older sister not with the usual admiration and deference, but with a mixture of pain and nascent anger that she barely recognized in herself. The family approached, Linda leading the way in her expensive silk dress and high heels, her blonde hair perfectly styled in salon-perfect waves. "Caroline, I'm so glad you made it on time," Linda said, kissing the air near Caroline's cheeks without actually touching her. "Was the trip smooth?" Robert gave a cordial nod, already distracted by his phone, probably checking work emails even on a Saturday. Kyle murmured an almost inaudible, "Hi," his eyes glued to his phone, fingers gliding across the screen in quick movements. Caroline felt the familiar pang of being treated as an afterthought, but this time the feeling came with the recent memory of those words on the show. "The trip was great," Caroline replied, her voice firmer than she expected. "I'm so excited for Daniel." Linda smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, professional and distant. "Us too. He worked so hard. You know, he's already been accepted into 3 prestigious master's programs, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and Columbia. He's still deciding which one to choose." There was undeniable pride in Linda's voice, but also something more, a need to emphasize her son's achievements in a way that seemed implicitly to compare them to Caroline's own life. Before Caroline could respond, Linda was already waving to other acquaintances on the other side of the auditorium. "Oh, there are the Hendersons. I need to greet them quickly. Robert, are you coming?" And just as quickly as they appeared, they dispersed, leaving Caroline alone again in her row.
She sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the program hidden under her bag, as if it were a stone. The ceremony began promptly at 10 in the morning. The dean ascended the podium and gave an inspiring speech about the future, about dreams and limitless potential. Caroline tried to pay attention, but her mind kept returning to that phrase, the ant who never achieved anything. Did Daniel really think that? Or worse, had Linda planted that idea in his head over the years? Caroline thought of all the times she had helped Daniel. When he was 12 and needed help with a science project, it was Caroline he spent 3 consecutive weekends with him in the library, researching and assembling a working model of the solar system. When he was 16 and stressed about his university entrance exams, it was Caroline who took him for walks in the park, teaching him breathing techniques to control his anxiety. When he entered university and was struggling financially in his freshman year, because Linda and Robert had overstretched their budget with the new house, it was Caroline who discreetly deposited $500 into his account every month for an entire year, sacrificing her own savings. But of course, none of that mattered, because she was just the ant who never achieved anything. The names began to be called in alphabetical order. Caroline watched dozens of young people go up on stage, shake the dean's hand, receive their diplomas, while families applauded and cheered. She held her camera ready to capture Daniel's moment, but her hands still trembled slightly. Finally, the announcer called out, "Daniel Robert Mitchell, Bachelor of Science in Biology with magna cum laude distinction." Linda's family erupted in applause and cheers. Robert stood up, whistling loudly. Kyle even looked up from his phone for a moment. Caroline also stood, clapping mechanically but feeling an odd distance from the moment, as if she were watching everything from outside her own body. Daniel crossed the stage with confident steps, his smile wide and genuine. He looked so happy, so fulfilled, and Caroline felt a confusing mix of genuine pride in him and deep pain at how he seemingly viewed her. After the ceremony, there was an outdoor reception in the university gardens. Tables with white tablecloths offered canapés, fruit, and champagne. She waited patiently on the periphery of the group until he noticed her. "Aunt Caroline!" Daniel exclaimed, opening his arms for a hug. "You came! Thank you for being here." She hugged him, feeling his height. He had grown so much since he was a little boy she used to take to the library on Saturdays. "Congratulations, Daniel. I'm so proud of you," she said, and it was true, despite everything. Daniel smiled. "Thank you. It means a lot." There was a sincerity in his voice that made Caroline hesitate. Did he really not realize how offensive those words were on the show? Or did he simply not care? Linda appeared beside them with a camera. "Let's take a family photo," she announced. Everyone gathered, Daniel in the center, Linda and Robert on either side of him, Tile in front. Linda looked at Caroline and made a vague gesture. "Caroline, could you take the picture for us?" It wasn't a request, it was an assumption. Of course Caroline would take the picture, it was always like that. She wasn't part of the family photo, she was the one holding the camera. But this time, something different happened. Caroline didn't take the camera. "Actually," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, "I'd like to be in the picture too, if you don't mind." There was a brief, awkward silence. Linda blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. "Oh, sure, she said quickly, forcing a smile. "We can ask someone to take it for all of us." They managed to get another parent to take the picture, and Caroline stood on the edge of the group, next to Kyle. She smiled for the camera, but inside, something had changed irreversibly. After the photo was taken, Caroline discreetly handed Daniel the package containing the laptop. "Just a small gift to help you with your master's studies," she said. After the photo was taken, Caroline discreetly handed Daniel the package containing the laptop. "Just a small gift to help you with your master's studies," she said. Daniel opened it excitedly, his eyes widening when he saw the state-of-the-art model. "Aunt Caroline, this is amazing, but you didn't need to spend so much." Linda appeared behind him and peered over his shoulder. Her eyebrows rose.
Wow, Caroline, this must have cost a fortune. Are you sure you can afford it? There was something in the way Linda said it, a tone that suggested concern but carried a hint of condescension, as if Caroline were irresponsible for spending money on an expensive gift when her own life was so modest. I can, Caroline replied, meeting her sister's eyes. I wanted to do something special for Daniel. The party continued, but Caroline felt increasingly out of place. She watched Linda circulate among the guests, introducing Daniel, talking about his accomplishments, his master's degree options, the bright future that awaited him. And every time someone asked about Caroline, Linda would say something like, "Oh, this is my sister Caroline. She works in a library," and a turn that made a respectable profession seem insignificant. Around 3 in the afternoon, Caroline decided she'd had enough. She found Daniel to say goodbye. "Are you leaving already?" he asked, looking genuinely disappointed. "The trip back is long," she explained, "but it was wonderful being here. Enjoy your special day." She hugged him again, and when she pulled away, she couldn't resist. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Aunt Caroline." "In the program, you wrote that I'm the aunt who never accomplished anything. Do you really think that of me?" Daniel's face instantly turned red. He looked down at his shoes. I didn't write that," he admitted quietly. "Mom helped with the acknowledgments. She said it would be more honest, that it would be an acknowledgement that you've always been there even without having great accomplishments of your own. I didn't think it would sound so bad." Caroline felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. So it had been Linda, of course. "I understand," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Thank you for telling me the truth." She turned to leave, but Daniel grabbed her arm. "Aunt Caroline, wait. I'm so sorry. I should have reread it before handing it in. It was insensitive. You've always been amazing to me." Caroline looked at her nephew, seeing the genuine guilt in his young eyes. He was just a boy, influenced by his parents, but still, he had allowed those words to be printed. "It's okay, Daniel," she said, though it wasn't. "Enjoy your graduation." The drive home was the longest of Caroline's life. She drove on autopilot, her mind processing decades of memories in a new light. All the times Linda had treated her as less. Every time her accomplishments were minimized or ignored, every time she was left out, forgotten, treated as a secondary figure in the family narrative, Caroline thought about her life. At 52, she was a senior librarian, having worked at the same municipal library for 28 years. She had no children, never married, and lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment. By Linda's standards, by the world's standards perhaps, she hadn't really accomplished anything remarkable. But then Caroline began to truly think about her life, not through Linda's eyes, but through her own. She thought about the countless students she had helped over the years, children who came to the library after school because they lacked supervision at home, and Caroline was always there with a smile, a snack, and help with their homework. She thought about the adult literacy program she started 10 years ago, which had already taught over 200 people to read. She thought about the countless hours of volunteering at shelters, on book donation drives, and visiting nursing homes where she read to the elderly. She thought about Maria, a 40-year-old immigrant she had taught to read in English, who now works as a nursing assistant and supported 3 children alone. Maria still sent Caroline cards every Christmas, calling her my angel. She thought about young Marcus, a troubled teenager who used to cause trouble at the library, but Caroline saw potential in him. She connected him with mentoring programs, helped him apply for scholarships. Now Marcus was in college, studying engineering. She thought about her collection of over 2,000 rare children's books that she was cataloging to eventually donate to libraries in underprivileged communities. She thought about the poems she wrote in secret, some published in small literary journals, but which she never mentioned to her family because she knew they wouldn't be taken seriously. She thought about the watercolors she painted on weekends, selling some at local craft fairs, using the money to buy art supplies for children's programs at the library. When Caroline finally arrived home, it was almost 7 o'clock in the evening. She parked in the building's underground garage, grabbed her bag, and went up to her 4th-floor apartment.
Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it. The walls covered with shelves overflowing with books, the small easel in the corner near the window where she painted, the comfortable but worn sofa where she read every night. It wasn't a mansion like Linda's house. There were no trophies or diplomas from prestigious universities on the walls, but it was hers, and every object there had a story, a meaning. Caroline made herself a cup of tea and sat in her favorite chair by the window overlooking the small neighborhood park. She picked up her journal, a habit she'd kept for years, and began to write about her day. But instead of wallowing in grief, she felt something different emerging: clarity. For the first time in her life, Caroline realized that the problem wasn't that she hadn't accomplished anything. The problem was that she had allowed other people to define what achievement meant. She had internalized Linda's values, the values of a society that measured success in money, status, and external markers of accomplishment. But what if there was another way to measure a life? What if what really mattered wasn't how much money you made or what title you held, but how many lives you touched, how many people you helped, how much love you put into the world? That night, Caroline made a decision. She was no longer going to accept being treated as less by her family. She was no longer going to attend events where she was an afterthought. She was no longer going to sacrifice her time and money for people who didn't value her. On Monday morning, Caroline returned to work at the library with renewed energy. During her lunch break, she sought out the director, Mrs. Patricia Hernandez, a 60-year-old woman who had always supported Caroline. "Pat," Caroline said, "I've been thinking about expanding our literacy program. How about we create creative writing workshops as well? I've seen many adults in the community who want to express their stories but don't have the tools." Patricia's eyes lit up. "Caroline, that's a fantastic idea. Let's submit a grant proposal to the Municipal Arts Foundation. With your track record, I'm sure we'll get it approved." In the following weeks, Caroline immersed herself in the project. She wrote detailed proposals, researched resumes, contacted local writers who could volunteer as instructors, and in the process, she rediscovered her own passion for writing. Meanwhile, Linda called several times. Caroline ignored most of the calls, responding only with short text messages. Finally, after 2 weeks, Linda showed up at the library one Thursday afternoon.
"Caroline, you're being dramatic. It was just a factual observation. You never got married, never had children, you work in a library. It's not like you cured cancer or built a business empire. And you think that gives you the right to publicly humiliate me?" Caroline's voice was rising and some library visitors began to stare. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Linda, let's go outside." They went out to the small patio behind the library, where there were some picnic tables under trees. Caroline sat at one of them, and Linda hesitantly did the same, clearly uncomfortable with the casual setting. "Look," Linda began, her tone artificially softening, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but you have to admit, Caroline, your life is quite limited. I just wanted Daniel to acknowledge that despite your limitations, you've always been there. I thought it was a compliment." Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "A compliment? Linda, you called me a failure at my nephew's graduation program, in front of hundreds of people. How could that be a compliment?" "I didn't call you a failure," protested Linda. "I said you've never accomplished anything. There's a difference." "No, there isn't." Caroline leaned forward. "And you know what? You're wrong. I've accomplished a lot. Just because my accomplishments don't come with gold plaques or six-figure salaries doesn't mean they don't exist." Linda rolled her eyes. "Please, Caroline, don't pretend your little life is as significant as yours," Caroline interrupted. "Is that what this is? A competition? Because if it is, Linda, I want you to know that I'm not competing. I never have been. But you're clearly obsessed with proving you're better than me." "I don't need to prove anything," said Linda coldly. "The facts speak for themselves. I have a successful family, a beautiful house, a husband with an established career. What do you have? A rented apartment and a book collection?" Caroline felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall.
I have something you'll never have, Linda. I have a clear conscience. I sleep soundly at night knowing I helped people without expecting anything in return. Can you say the same? Linda was speechless. How dare you? No. Caroline stood up. I dared to remain silent for too long, but that ends today. I will no longer tolerate your disrespect. I'm no longer going to attend family events where I'm treated like a second-class citizen, and I'm definitely not going to give expensive gifts to people who don't value me anymore. So that's it? You're going to cut us off? Linda also stood up, her face red with anger. I'm not cutting anyone off, Caroline said calmly. I'm just setting boundaries. If you and your family want to have a relationship with me, it will be based on mutual respect. I won't accept less anymore. Linda grabbed her designer bag and slung the strap over her shoulder. You're going to regret this, Caroline. We're your only family. What are you going to do? Growing old alone, surrounded by books? If necessary, yes, Caroline replied. I'd rather be alone with my dignity than surrounded by people who make me feel small. Linda stomped out, her heels echoing on the concrete. Caroline watched her leave, and for the first time in decades, she didn't feel that old anxiety of having disappointed her older sister. Instead, she felt freedom. In the following months, Caroline's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. The creative writing workshop program was approved and launched with great success. 15 adults enrolled in the first class, including Maria, the immigrant Caroline had taught to read years before. One night a week, they met in the library, sharing stories, learning storytelling techniques, encouraging each other. Caroline discovered she had a talent for teaching, for drawing people's stories out and helping them find their voices. One of the students, a 60-year-old war veteran named Tom, wrote a memoir about his experiences that Caroline helped edit. He managed to get it published through a small independent publisher. The book received positive reviews in local newspapers. Tom credited Caroline in the dedication, to Caroline Mitchell, who taught me that it's never too late to tell your story. Caroline also began to take her own writing more seriously. She entered a short story contest sponsored by a state literary magazine, and to her surprise, came in second place. The prize was small, only $500, but the validation was invaluable. Her story was published in the magazine's fall issue. For the first time, Caroline sent copies to some friends, but not to Linda. She no longer needed her sister's approval. At work, Patricia began preparing Caroline to eventually take over as assistant director when the current incumbent retired the following year. It was a promotion that came with more responsibilities and a significant salary increase. Caroline was nervous but excited. Throughout this time, Linda made no contact. Daniel, however, called a few times. The first calls were awkward, full of awkward silences and timid apologies, but gradually they began to rebuild a relationship, this time based on conversation, genuine, not out of family obligation. Daniel shared his anxieties about choosing a master's program, his doubts about pursuing medicine as his parents expected versus following his true interest in environmental research. And Caroline, for the first time, not only listened but challenged him. Daniel, she said during one of their calls, you're 23. This is your life, not your parents'. What do you want? There was a long pause. I think I want to study marine conservation. I've always loved the ocean, but Mom and Dad will be disappointed. They'll get over it, Caroline said with a conviction that surprised even herself. But you'll never get over living the life someone else chose for you. 2 weeks later, Daniel called again. Aunt Caroline, I've decided I'm going to accept the program at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego. It's focused on marine conservation. I told my parents yesterday. How did they react? Caroline asked, though she imagined the answer. Mom was furious. She said I was throwing away an incredible opportunity at Stanford for a hobby. Dad barely said anything.
But Aunt Caroline, I feel good about this. For the first time, I feel like I'm making a choice for myself. I'm proud of you, Daniel, Caroline said, and she really was. Need help moving to San Diego? Really? You'd do that? Of course, Caroline replied. That's what real family is for. That Christmas, Caroline did something she'd never done before. She didn't attend the traditional Christmas dinner at Linda's house. Instead, she hosted a dinner party at her apartment for an eclectic group of friends, including Maria and her family, Tom, the veteran writer, some colleagues from the library, and Marcus, the young man she had mentored, who was staying for the holidays. The apartment was crowded and noisy, nothing like Linda's elegant and formal dinners, but it was filled with genuine laughter, true gratitude, and love. During the meal, Maria raised her glass of cheap wine. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her accent still thick. "For Caroline. When I arrived in this country 5 years ago, I couldn't read English. I was ashamed, but Caroline treated me with dignity. She spent hours with me, patient, kind. She changed my life. So, for Caroline, the woman who changes lives." "For Caroline," they all echoed, raising their glasses. Caroline felt tears rolling down her face, but these were tears of pure joy. She looked around the table at these faces that loved her, not despite her life choices, but because of them. This was real success. This was real achievement. 2 days after Christmas, Caroline received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a card, and when she opened it, she immediately recognized Daniel's careful handwriting. "Dear Aunt Caroline," he had written, "I'm spending Christmas in San Diego, settling in before the program starts in January. Mom is upset I haven't come home, but I need to start living my own life. You taught me that. I want you to know I've spent the last few months thinking a lot about that graduation day and what was written in the program. I was cowardly to allow that to be published, even more cowardly not to defend you immediately. The truth, Aunt Caroline, is that you've achieved more than anyone in our family. You've earned genuine respect from people whose lives you've touched. You've earned integrity by living according to your values. You've earned courage by finally standing up for yourself. These are achievements that no diploma or bank account can match. Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. And thank you for showing me that there's more than one way to live a meaningful life. With love and admiration, Daniel. P.S. When you come to visit me in San Diego, I want to take you to see the gray whales. They migrate in the spring. I think you'll love it." Caroline held the card against her chest, smiling through her tears. This was the kind of gift money couldn't buy. She placed the card on her desk next to a photo of her and Daniel when he was 7, both covered in paint from an art project they had done together. That spring, Caroline took a week off work and flew to San Diego. Daniel picked her up from the airport in a borrowed Jeep, his face tanned by the Californian sun, his smile lighter and more genuine than she had ever seen. They spent their days exploring the coast, visiting the lab where Daniel worked, and yes, watching the magnificent gray whales on their migratory journey. One evening, while dining at a small seafood restaurant overlooking the ocean, Daniel finally mentioned Linda. "Mom asked about you," he said hesitantly. She's not doing well, Aunt Caroline. I think for the first time in her life, she's realizing she can't control everything and everyone around her. Dad mentioned they're having marital problems." Caroline felt a pang of something, not exactly satisfaction, but a sadness that Linda had spent so much time building a life based on appearances rather than substance. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, and it was true. Even after everything, she didn't wish her sister any harm. "She asked for your phone number," Daniel continued. "I didn't give it to her without first asking if you're open to talking to her." Caroline considered it. Part of her wanted to say no, to maintain the boundaries she had set, but another part, the part that still remembered playing with Linda when they were children, that remembered the older sister who had once protected her from bullies at school, That part felt compassion. "You can give her the number," she finally said, "but I'll decide if and when to answer." 3 weeks after returning home, Caroline was in her apartment one Saturday night, working on a new short story, when her phone rang. It was a number she recognized. Linda. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello?" "Caroline?" Linda's voice sounded different, smaller, less confident. "Thank you for answering." "Linda?" Caroline kept her voice neutral. There was a long pause. Caroline could almost hear her sister struggling with the words. I was wrong," Linda finally said, and Caroline almost dropped the phone. In over 50 years, she had never heard Linda admit to being wrong about anything.
"About what specifically?" Caroline asked, not wanting to make things too easy. "About everything," Linda said, her voice breaking. "About how I treated you, about what I wrote on Daniel's show, about years and years of making you feel less important. Caroline, you're my sister, my only sister, and I treated you horribly because I was jealous." Now Caroline definitely hadn't expected this. Jealous? Of me? "Yes," Linda admitted. "You were always so genuine, so easily satisfied. You didn't need big things to be happy, while I built my whole life around appearances, impressing people, proving my worth through material achievements. And even so, you seemed more at peace than I ever was." Caroline sat back in her armchair, processing. "Linda, why didn't you ever tell me this?" "Pride," Linda said simply. "Stupid pride. And now my marriage is falling apart because Robert finally realized he'd marry a woman who cares more about what the neighbors think than about him. Daniel barely speaks to me because he can't stand my constant attempts to control his life. Kyle is in therapy because he grew up thinking love is conditional, based on achievements, and I pushed away the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. You." The words came out in a torrent, as if Linda had held them all in for a long time. Caroline felt her own tears beginning to fall. "Linda, I don't love you unconditionally," she said honestly. "Not anymore. You hurt me deeply, repeatedly, and it took me years to realize it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't inadequate. You made me feel inadequate." "I know," Linda sobbed. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately or for us to go back to how we were before. I know I can't undo the damage. But Caroline, can I try to start over? Can we try to build something real, something honest?" Caroline looked around her apartment, at the books she loved, the paintings she had created, the photos of people whose lives she had touched. She thought of the woman she had been a year ago, the woman who would have accepted Linda's apology immediately, desperate for family approval. But she was no longer that woman. "Linda," she said carefully, "I appreciate your apology, but forgiveness isn't something I can give overnight. You've spent decades making me feel small. It will take time to heal this." "I understand," Linda said quickly. "As much time as you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, and that I finally see you, the real you, and she's amazing." Caroline felt something soften in her chest. Not complete forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of something. "How about we take small steps?" she suggested. "We could try having lunch together in a few weeks, just the 2 of us, really talking without the whole family, without expectations, and we'll see how it goes." "I'd love that," Linda said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for at least giving me a chance." After they hung up, Caroline sat for a long time, watching the night sky through the window. She had no illusions that her relationship with Linda would magically heal. There would be relapses, difficult moments, old patterns trying to resurface. But for the first time, there was honesty. And perhaps, just perhaps, this could be a beginning. 2 months later, Caroline was in her office at the library, now officially in her new position as assistant director, when Patricia entered with a large envelope. "This just arrived for you," she said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "From the governor." Caroline opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a formal letter and a framed certificate. She read aloud, "Dear Ms. Mitchell,
It is with great pleasure that we inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the State Community Service Award in recognition of your 28 years of exceptional dedication to literacy and education in our community. Your contributions to the adult literacy program, your creative writing workshops, and your measurable impact on hundreds of lives exemplify the best of the spirit of public service. The award ceremony will be held in the Capitol next month. Please confirm your attendance. Caroline looked at Patricia, stunned. I didn't know I was being considered for this. Patricia smiled. I nominated you 6 months ago, along with several letters of support from people you've helped over the years. Maria wrote 5 pages about how you changed her life. Tom wrote an entire essay. Marcus sent a letter from his college. Caroline, you've touched so many lives. It was time someone officially recognized that. Caroline felt tears welling up in her eyes again. She thought about that awful day at Daniel's graduation, reading those cruel words, the aunt who never accomplished anything. And now, here she was, holding an award from the governor for her achievements. The irony didn't go unnoticed. On the day of the award ceremony, Caroline was nervous as she dressed in her best suit, the same one she'd worn to Daniel's graduation a year ago. But this time, when she looked in the mirror, she saw something different. She saw a woman who knew her own worth. She saw real achievement. The auditorium in the Capitol was packed. Patricia was there along with a delegation from the library. Maria brought her whole family. Tom was there, already working on his second book. Marcus drove 6 hours from his university to attend. And at the back of the auditorium, Caroline saw 2 familiar faces she hadn't expected. Daniel, who had flown in from San Diego, and beside him, hesitant and with eyes red from crying, Linda. When Caroline's name was called and she went up on stage to receive her award, the ovation was deafening. The governor shook her hand and whispered, "The letters we received about you were extraordinary."
You are exactly the kind of citizen who makes our state better. Caroline accepted the certificate and turned to the microphone. She hadn't prepared a speech, but the words came naturally. For a long time, she began, her voice surprisingly firm. I measured my life by other people's standards. I believed that because I didn't follow a traditional path to success, because I didn't have certain things that society values, I had no value. But I learned something important this year. Achievement isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you contribute. It's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you give. It's not about impressing strangers, it's about impacting lives. She looked at the audience, her eyes meeting Linda's. Someone once described me as the person who never achieved anything, and that description almost destroyed me. But then I realized that their opinions said more about their values than about my life. Because when I look back, I see achievement after achievement. Every child I taught to love books, every adult I taught to read, every person who found their voice through the workshops I created. These are my accomplishments, and I wouldn't trade any of them for all the prestigious degrees or grand houses in the world. The ovation that followed was even louder. Caroline descended from the stage, embraced by Patricia, by Maria, by Tom, by Marcus. And then, through the crowd, Linda approached. They stood face to face for a moment, 2 sisters separated by years of hurt, but connected by decades of shared history. You were right, Linda said, her voice almost inaudible in the murmur of the hall. I was wrong about everything. Caroline, you have achieved more than I will ever achieve, and I finally see that. Caroline said nothing for a moment. Then, slowly, she opened her arms. Linda joined the embrace, and both wept, releasing years of pain, resentment, misunderstandings. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it didn't erase the past, but it was, perhaps, a beginning. 5 years had passed since that fateful graduation day. Caroline was now 57 and had been promoted to director of the municipal library. Under her leadership, the library had transformed into a true community center, offering not only books, but literacy programs in 6 different languages, creative writing workshops, art classes for seniors, free tutoring for students, and even a reintegration program for ex-convicts that Caroline herself had initiated. Her book of short stories, finally published by an independent publisher, had won a state literary award. It wasn't a national bestseller, but in the libraries and schools of her region, it was required reading. Students wrote to her, sharing how her stories had touched them. This meant more to Caroline than any bestseller list ever could. Daniel had completed his master's degree and now worked for an international marine conservation organization, traveling the world to protect endangered species. He visited Caroline whenever he was in the United States, and they had long video call conversations about life, purpose, and meaning. He often said she was his moral compass. Kyle, Linda's youngest son, had graduated high school and, to everyone's surprise, including his own, chose not to attend a prestigious university. Instead, he enrolled in a community film school, pursuing his dream of becoming a documentary filmmaker. Linda had learned, painfully but necessarily, to support her children's choices even when they didn't meet her expectations. Linda and Robert's marriage had survived, but only through a lot of couples therapy and a commitment from both of them to rebuild their relationship on more honest grounds. Linda had volunteered to help with Caroline's literacy program, and although she wasn't a natural teacher, her presence there, humbly helping where she could, was a form of penance and growth. The sisters' relationship never returned to what it was before, because what it was before wasn't healthy. But they built something new, something based on mutual honesty, clear boundaries, and genuine respect. They had lunch together once a month, conversations that were sometimes easy, sometimes difficult, but always real. On this particular day in October, Caroline was in her library organizing a special exhibition.
On the walls were photos and stories of 100 people whose lives had been transformed by the library's programs over the past 30 years. Each photo came with a short biography written by the person themselves, sharing their journey. There was Maria, now a nursing supervisor and proud mother of 3 college-aged children. There was Tom, author of 3 published books about his experiences in war and healing. There was Marcus, now a civil engineer, married and expecting his first child. There were dozens of others, a 70-year-old woman who learned to read and was now a volunteer at a shelter, a man who overcame addiction through the library's support groups and was now a rehabilitation counselor, a teenager who found her voice in writing workshops and was now studying journalism at a university. At the center of the exhibit, in large letters, was the theme, Achievement Redefined, 100 Stories of Transformation. While Caroline adjusted the last photo, Linda entered the library. She stopped at the entrance to the exhibit, her eyes scanning the photos, reading the stories. She stood there for almost an hour, absorbing each one. Finally, she approached Caroline, silent tears streaming down her face. "This," Linda said, gesturing toward the exhibit, "this is a legacy. This is what matters, and I wasted so much time not understanding this." Caroline placed her hand on her sister's shoulder. "You understand now, and that's what matters." That night, after everyone had left and the library was silent, Caroline sat in her favorite chair in the reading section, surrounded by the books she had always loved. She thought about that graduation program 5 years ago, about those cruel words that had almost broken her. She thought about the journey since then, about finding her voice, setting boundaries, standing up for her worth. She thought about all the lives she had touched, and how they, in turn, had touched hers. Caroline picked up her journal, the very one in which she had written 5 years ago about her pain and confusion. She opened a blank page and began to write. Today, 5 years after the day that changed everything, I realized that painful moment was a gift in disguise. It forced me to question everything I believed about myself. It forced me to choose, accept someone else's narrative about my life, or write my own story. I chose to write my own story, and what a story it has been. It's not the story my family expected.
It's not a story society values, but it's my story. And it's filled with accomplishments that no training program, no place card, no other person's opinion can diminish. I earned self-respect. I earned purpose. I earned genuine connections. I earned the ability to sleep soundly at night, knowing I made a difference. If that's not accomplishment, then the word is meaningless. For any reading in the future, if you find someone else's limited standards set, remember you have the power to redefine accomplishment for yourself. You have the power to write your own story, and your story is valuable exactly as it is. Caroline closed her journal and looked around the library silently. This place that had been her sanctuaries, her field of work, her platform for making a difference. In the shadows between the shelves, she could almost see all those who had passed through those doors over the years, each carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own definitions of accomplishment. Externally, while recognition was good, it wasn't the validation from others, although that helped, but the inner certainty that you lived according to your values, that you made a difference, that you never declared anything more, could take that away from her.